What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Hands On channel. I thought today I'd bring you over to the property. I haven't actually brought you guys over here in quite a while. I've just been busy doing other stuff, and it's been fairly cold, so I haven't been able to do much. But today it got up to the mid 60s, so I'm really happy about that. Got out of the house. I was getting a little cabin fever just from being inside. I'm a real outdoor person, so when I get stuck inside for a long period of time, it's a real bummer to me. It can kind of get me down, you know, and it's just good to get over here and get some projects done. But I thought today I would reveal something. A lot of people have been asking me, how much land do I have? And I've been very aloof about that for a couple of reasons. I'm a very private person. I know it might not seem like it. You know, you're like, well, why do you have a YouTube channel or whatever? But if you notice, I never tell my name. I never tell like specific locations and things like that. And it's not because I don't want the audience to know. It's because I'm just trying to maintain a level of anonymity, you know, and I'm a real big believer in liberty and national sovereignty and my own individual sovereignty, you know, my right to be basically left alone. And even though I have different opinions than a lot of people might have, you know, especially people on the left, there's no reason for them to, what do they call it, dox me or anything like that. And so, yeah, that's part of the reason why I've been very skeptical about telling certain details. But enough people have asked me now in different videos that I've done how much land I have. So if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to reveal how much land we bought here and kind of how we went about it. But I'll tell you the truth, in the beginning, we were just looking for 20 acres of land. If we could have found the right price on 10 acres of land, we probably would have bought that, because we were just that desperate and that worried about the things that were coming on. And if you don't know, if you're new to the channel, my wife and I, let me tell you, let's go way back in the Wayback Machine here. So my wife and I, back in like 2016, 2017, we started thinking that, you know, we needed to have a place that's off-grid, remote, isolated from other people. We didn't want it to be so isolated that, you know, it'd be hard for our family and people and our friends to come and visit us and stuff. But here's the deal. In the state that I'm from, at that time, land was very hard to come by. And my wife and I went around, we looked at several like 10 and 20 acre tracts of land, and there would always be something wrong with it. We actually bid on one that was like 11 acres, and we thought we were going to get it. It was a good price, but somebody else, they like ended up selling it to their friend or something. So we were very frustrated at that time. And because of that, we were like, well, we can't find land here in the state that we're from. Maybe we need to look elsewhere. And I've always been very attracted to the Rocky Mountains. I love mountains. I mean, I don't know what the heck happened. I was born and raised in flatland, but, you know, every time I get near a mountain, I just feel it in my soul, in my spirit, you know, some kind of a connection with nature and the call to want to go climb that mountain and see what's up on top of it. I know a lot of people aren't like that, and I'm not an expert mountain climber by any means. Again, I grew up in flatland, so I haven't really had a lot of opportunities to mountain climb, but the stuff I do is more like boulder hopping. And, you know, if I'm climbing a mountain, I'm climbing up a nice, easy saddle where it's going to be a nice walk where I can get up there. You know, it'll still be a steep walk, but I'm not doing like the hanging off the side of the cliff type stuff. You know, that's not what I'm into, but I am into hiking and getting out in nature and just seeing things, you know, and absorbing things into my mind that I wouldn't be able to get sitting around watching TV or in four walls of a house. So anyways, I'm an outdoorsy type person, and we needed land. We've had a place. We had a place outside of the city, and we still have it. We're still living in it full time right now, but I've got a place in the suburbs that has like close to 2 acres. It's just under 2 acres, but it's back in the, you know, kind of in a cul-de-sac neighborhood, you know, and I've got pretty good neighbors for the most part. I mean, it's, you know, I don't really have any complaints about any of my neighbors, which is a good thing, because, you know, it sucks when you get stuck next to a really bad neighbor. Our first house, we had a really horrible neighbor next door, and the guy he just got off on trying to make our lives miserable. You know, we were a young couple with a newborn child, and we didn't have time to be dealing with that. But that guy was constantly doing things just to basically make our lives miserable there on our we had 1 acre of land, but it was a real long, narrow strip of land, you know. And so we sold that place. We did really well on that. We bought our place in the suburbs. We're able to pay a big majority of that off out front because we'd made money on our first house. So to any of you younger listeners that are still with me on the channel here, please, if you never listen to anything I ever say after this, that's fine. But do this one thing and it'll pay dividends. If you're in a stable relationship at a young age and you've got, you know, a wife or whatever, and you're married young and you're stable, everything's good, I highly recommend you go out and you buy a house, or buy, you know, I don't care if it's in the suburbs, buy if you can afford it, buy some land, or if you can find it in your area, buy some land, you know, out in the country. And, you know, if you have to, put a mobile home on it while you build your house, or put a travel trailer on there or a shipping container and live out of that while you build your dream house, you know, and do it yourself. Because, you know, I was looking around the other day on the Facebook marketplace, and it's just mind-boggling to me what people are paying for rent these days. I mean, I saw this one house, and it was called a farmhouse. It was like 1,000 square foot house. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, nothing fancy, raised wood floors, you know, nothing fancy about this house. And they wanted $1,500 a month rent for it. I'm telling you what, you can buy a lot of nails and a lot of boards for $1,500 a month. So heed my advice on that. Trust me, at least for me, in my circumstances, in the time I grew up in the United States, those decisions of buying early paid dividends. I was 19 years old. I'm super proud to say that. I'm not going to lie. I was 19 years old when my wife and I bought our first house. And it was a, you know, it was a starter house. It wasn't a big fancy mansion. So you have to keep your expectations in reality and grounded in reality. But eventually, like I said, we sold that house, and we put a big portion of that money that we made on equity. When we sold that house, you know, we got to pocket quite a bit of money. And after we did the math, we looked at it, and at the time rent was like $600 a month or something, so less than half the price of what it is today. And this was back in the 90s. And at that time, my wife and I were like, oh, holy crap. We have lived there in that first starter house for like 14 years. And, you know, we made our monthly payments on the mortgage and stuff like that. And then toward the end, we started doubling up on those payments when money was better and such, right? Well, when we sold that house, we were just like blown away, because we pocketed so much of the money that we would have been spending on rent. So I've always been a big proponent of land ownership. If nothing else, like Will Rogers said, buy land, they ain't making no more of it. I mean, it's just one of those things that if you're an outdoor person like myself and my wife, and, you know, you like getting out here and gardening and working with livestock and animals, you need land to do that. So I advise you to, you know, have a more modest house, a smaller house. I'm not saying you got to live in a dump or anything. Even if it's a trailer or mobile home, make sure it's a decent one that's going to be pretty well insulated and stuff like that while you build your dream home. At least that's my plan. So I thought I'd walk you around here a little bit and show you guys what's going on, what we've got planned. We're just coming from one of my fields back here. It's one of the smaller fields, but it's the place where I built the bushcraft teepee back here. So if you follow the channel, you know what I'm talking about. I built a little teepee back here, and it's been a lot of fun. It doesn't stay dry inside of there, but it's actually held up quite well. It's held up quite well, and it'll get you, if it's really windy and cold or snowy or anything like that, it's perfect for that sort of thing. It's not so great if it's raining, because the cedar limbs aren't waterproof. But yeah, guys, I have a blast out here. Every time I'm out here at this property, I just love it. I'm just in nature. I'm in tune with nature, and it just clears my mind from all of the negativity that I see on the news every time I turn it on. I mean, it's just 100% negative these days. You guys know that. So I thought we'd try to make a more positive video here, and maybe this would encourage people to get out there, and that way you won't give up, because I know how it was. Again, let me fast forward back into the story I was telling there. So my wife and I, we had this house. We were living in the suburbs back in like 2016, 2017. And we were like, man, our daughter's out of the house now. There's really no reason, you know, for us to keep this suburb house. Let's find some land in the country. Well, we looked and looked and looked on everything, Zillow, Realtor.com, even Craigslist. I was desperately looking for bare, raw land or even land with a trailer or something, you know, or land that needed cleanup, or even land with an old shoddy farmhouse that needed to be tore down. I was looking for everything I could find, and there was nothing at that time, people, that we could afford. There was land out there, but we couldn't afford it. So, kind of in a hasty, desperate decision, I'm not going to lie. One night I was looking in different states, and I thought, you know, I'll just look out in the Rocky Mountains and see what kind of prices land is going for out there. And at the time, now since then, this land has exploded out there in price, which is a good thing for me. But at the time, you could actually buy like 35 acres out there for $25,000. I was just like, oh, holy crap, this is a place where you can still buy vast chunks of land for reasonable prices. So, I mean, I was really blown away by that. Now, the place is at 8,000 feet, you know, it's like 8,700 feet. So not everybody's going to be able to handle that kind of elevation. It's way up there, man. And everything is different out there. So for several years now, we've owned that house out in the Rocky Mountains, and there's a house on the property, but it was unfinished. It's an ICF house, and I made several videos back in my catalog here. If you look back on YouTube, if you want to see what that house was like, it was a really cool house, an ICF house with like, I mean, the walls were like 12 inches thick. ICF is, in case you don't know, it's like a way they form concrete. They put these foam blocks out like Legos, and then they put rebar and such inside of it, and then there's like 6 or 8 inches of concrete core in the middle of that locks. It's a monolithic pour, so it locks all of the walls together. It's a super strong, I mean, it's a freaking fortress, no doubt about it, which is one of the reasons why I bought it. It's got a metal roof, you know. It was what they call dried in. And there were some problems with it, of course. Like everything I buy, there were some things I was going to have to work on. Well, I ended up spending like 2 summers residing the entire thing because the previous owners had put bad siding on, or they just did a bad job. They didn't install the siding right. So my wife and I spent like 2 summers getting the siding right so that the place would be truly dried in. We got everything caulked up and dried in, and we were just getting ready to start doing interior work. And like there's plumbing in the house, but it doesn't come out above the slab. It's just, you know, it's what they call rough in, I guess. You know, there's no toilets, there's none of that stuff. So our time out there would be very limited. You know, we would only stay like a week or 2 max, because, you know, if you needed to use the bathroom, you had to run into town, or if you needed to take a shower, you had to run into town and pay like $5 for a shower. So, I mean, that stuff was getting kind of expensive. And of course, we would rough it and go 2 or 3 days as long as we could, doing bucket baths and stuff like that. But, you know, eventually you need a real proper shower, and you end up spending a lot of money on stuff like that. And then when you're in town, you spend money on getting something to eat and other things, buying, you know, some beer or whatever else it is. So it ended up just kind of being this thing where it was costly for us to do this and to continue this project. But we were willing to do it. We were still all 100% in at that time. And then came 2019. We were in the height of, we had just finished up the siding and just finished up the caulking, and we were hanging interior doors and just making the place a lot more livable, even though there wasn't above slab plumbing installed yet. We had the septic system installed. We were getting ready to put the well in. We actually had a well dug there on that property, but no pump in the hole. So long story short, what came along that disrupted everything? Well, the Rona. The Rona came along and basically upset the apple cart and ruined my situation. Not only was I suddenly scrambling to find different work, because I work in the oil market and kind of as a subsidiary of the oil market, not directly for the rigs, but if rigs aren't drilling, then I'm not making any money, basically is how that works. And everything was shutting down. All the oil stuff was shutting down. People were being told to stay home. Some states, and one of those states is where this house is, out in the Rocky Mountains, had issued a sort of a travel ban where you weren't allowed to come in there, and they were saying that they were going to give you hell if you had out-of-state tags and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I pay property taxes here. I own a house here. I should be allowed to come here. And I probably could have, but it was just one of these gray areas where their governor was so freaking liberal and communist and authoritarian in his actions, or her actions. I don't even know if it's a male or female governor over there, but they were so authoritarian that I was like, whoa, maybe I don't want to have a house in this state. Maybe I need to stay in the state where my wife and I, raised our kids and where we grew up, because it's a lot more of a red state. It's a lot more conservative. So basically at that point, we've been doing preparations to get that house ready to put up for sale. And hopefully that'll be a quick sale once that happens. Hopefully come spring, we'll be able to make that sale happen. And, the equity that we've got invested into that property will hopefully come back to us, threefold, and we'll be able to put that money into this property here, which is closer to our suburb house. It's a lot, and that was another problem that I didn't mention. I didn't think it was going to bog me down for 2 summers doing siding. So every time I would go out there, I was just doing siding, and it was really getting frustrating because it took me, 3 or 4 times longer than I thought it was going to, just because of the type of material and the, the conditions out there and stuff, and having to work with the weather at different times. But anyways, yeah, long story short, we're putting that place up for sale, and we're going to put everything into this property here. And I told you I'd tell you, how much property is it? Well, it's 100 acres. And part of the reason I didn't want to tell people that is because when you hear that, you're like, oh God, this guy must be rich. And I'm not rich. I promise you, I'm not rich. The reason and the way we've been able to do this is my wife and I, we've never been divorced. I married the girl at 19 years old, and we've stayed together the entire time. We've never been separated. We've never fought over children, you know, child custody or anything like that, which, as you guys know that have gone through it especially, is immensely draining on your financial situation when you have to go through that sort of thing. So, you know, I don't think it's luck. I think I picked the right one, and my wife picked the right one. We knew even way back then we were soulmates, and we'd be able to make it through thick and thin till death do us part. And we meant those vows when we took them. So even though we've had some rocky times along the way, no doubt about it, where we've been at each other's throats and stuff, as we've matured and stuff, that's less and less, obviously. And it's just, I picked the right one. I don't know what else to tell you. Be careful in who you choose as your partner, because that's a big deal. If my wife wasn't down for this, or for one thing, if my wife was a flaming liberal, I probably would have had to divorce her by now, or she would have divorced me, because I don't know how somebody that's a conservative and a liberty-minded person could ever be married to somebody that's a freaking flaming liberal, like these modern ones. And when I say liberal, I mean these extremists on the left that have taken control of everything right now. That's who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the classical liberals. In some ways, I am a classical liberal, but they have stolen that name along the way, and they're really radical progressives is probably a better term that suits them better. But anyways, back to the story at hand here. Since everything, like I said, you know, I've got a good wife. We've saved our money along the way. We're not debt people. We haven't gone into debt over vehicles like a lot of my friends along the way and coworkers and stuff. I'd see them showing up with new vehicles, and I'm like, man, how are you going to pay for that? Oh, well, it's, you know, it's just $379 a month for the rest of my life or whatever. And I'm just like, okay. And they'd show up with these new, nice new things, brand new things or whatever, and just, you know, whatever. I mean, if that's your life, I'm not going to judge you. If that's what you've decided is the most important thing for you to have is a nice, shiny new vehicle that's probably not going to last you more than a decade, then go ahead and do that. But for me, my wife actually said something one time. I was like driving around, and I seen this Corvette sitting up there, and I was 19 years old. So I was like, oh man, look at that Corvette. This is awesome. Oh, I'd love to have one of those. And my wife quickly pointed out, this is how smart she is. She quickly pointed out, she goes, yeah, but look at the place that Corvette is parked in front of. It was a brand new at the time Corvette, like a, you know, 99 or maybe, yeah, it was probably a 98, 99 model Corvette. And they'd come out with that newer body style, and it was just, man, I loved it, right? Well, my wife was like, yeah, but look at that place. And I took a look, and it was a ratty, and I'm not judging people for being in mobile homes or whatever. I've lived in them before, but there's a difference between a nice mobile home and one that's a rat bucket that's just, you know, garbage and should be pushed down. I'll show you a couple of them here in a minute. And one of the reasons that my wife and I, so, you know, the lesson there, the moral of the story there was what would you rather have? A really nice car that every day when you drive back and forth to work, you can be in that car for like 20, 30 minutes each way, right? Maybe you're in that car an hour or even 2 hours every day at max. But how much time do you spend in that house in comparison? Just something to think about. And I think younger people especially, and I remember this when I was young, we get caught up in this thing where it's like, oh man, I want to impress people with my shiny car, and they're going to see that and whatever, and people just don't think logically. If people were taught this kind of stuff in school, that, you know, what's the most important thing? A roof over your head and security in that front right there. So anyways, my wife and I bought 100 acres. And yeah, I guess I'm a land baron now. You know, there's people out there that got 300 or 400 acres and would laugh at my little 100 acres, you know, but to me, it's way more than I ever anticipated buying. My wife and I were looking for 10 or 20 acres. The reason we bought this was because it was a smoking deal on 100. And we were like, hey, well, we can go spend the same price on 20 or 40, or we can buy this 100 over here. Now, of course, it was more money than most of the 20-acre lots we were looking for, but not a lot more. And we were like, this is a no-brainer. We go look at this property, and of course, nothing is ever 100% perfection. I'm gonna have to do a lot of stuff to make it 100% perfection, or at least in my mind. So I'm going to take you around up here and show you some of the dilapidated buildings and old junk trailers that I'm going to have to tear down. All right, so here is liability number one. This thing here is just, it doesn't look super bad on the outside. I've seen worse, and the inside isn't super bad, but the thing is super wavy. The floor is all, you know, caving in. It's just not worth it. It's not worth fixing up or doing anything. There's places in it where you know, it's been leaking for years and stuff, but I haven't even measured it, but just looking at it, I'm going to say that thing's at least a 50-foot trailer there. It's a single wide, but it's a 50-footer. And I thought about trying to, if I could find somebody that was like, oh man, I'm looking for a trailer to fix up or something. I thought about trying to, you know, have it taken out of here. But as you can see, the tongue of the thing is all twisted up. So I don't think anyone would, I don't think it'd be worth it to anyone to come in here for this trailer to take that, you know, even for the scrap metal of the frame. It's not worth it because it's too much liability. So my plan is to start getting over here with my tractor. For one thing, there's some good metal on the roof. It looks like they reskinned the roof at one time to keep it from leaking as much. And so I'm going to get up there and get that steel off of there. I can use it for animal shelters, chicken coops, whatever, you know, here on the farm. So I'm going to save all the stuff I can out of it. There's one or two windows that's worth salvaging. The rest of them are garbage. We were going to try to salvage some of the insulation out of the walls just for our well house project, but after we started looking at it, it was so roachy and had rat poop and mouse poop all over it. We were like, no, I don't think so. I don't want to risk getting hantavirus or something like that by trying to reuse insulation. And plus, I'm sure it stinks. So anyways, this thing is a complete loss, except for one thing. The reason I don't want to just come over here and start really ripping it up is these things have double I-beams that run down the entire thing. Or maybe it's C-channel, but they're substantial pieces of metal. And I thought, you know, I could use that for some other projects in the future. Maybe making a bridge over one of my gullies and stuff like that. So there's a lot of possibilities. But yeah, the people that I bought this place from, they were living quite like gypsies. They weren't taking their trash out. They were throwing a lot of it right there in that pile behind that power pole. There was power turned on here when we came in, but there were Romex wires running right across the top of the ground over here. I mean, it was really redneck. When I was trying to mow and stuff, I had to be really careful not to run over a hot line, you know. So anyways, there's some junk I'm going to have to deal with for sure, but that's part of the reason that we, you know, got such a smoking deal on it, is we agreed that, hey, we're going to take all the junk along with it and we'll clean it up. That silver building is a well house. It was totally dilapidated, but there was a good functional well inside of there. So I've got a well with this property, but the building was junk. So my wife and I came out and we've been working on that. But yeah, a lot of junk, and this is after we've cleaned it up immensely. We've been over here for all last summer for sure, and part of the summer before that we were over here cleaning up. So when things got really, really scary with the Rona, my wife and I started looking again locally. We were like, hey, I see the writing on the wall. It's time for us to get some land. And so that's when we bought this. And part of the reason why is because we were just like, hey, we need to have a place where we can, you know, farm if we want to survive in the future. So I've got this other, like 1/3 of what's left of a trailer over here behind my shipping containers. I brought the shipping containers in and had those delivered. They're older, but I've got a plan for them. A buddy of mine was telling me, this one right here in front of me, the floor is kind of rotted out in it. This one, the floor is a little better, the one on the left, but it's still, you know, it needs some work. And what I've been thinking is what my buddy told me. He said, yeah, put it where you want it, level it off, tear the wooden floor out, go get a concrete mixer, and come in there and just pour 4 inches of concrete down in it for a floor. So I'm really thinking that's what I'm going to do. And I've spaced them out like that so I could visualize what it would be like to span some trusses across there and create a little room in the center. And then I'd be able to put my tractor in this one with a concrete floor once that's in it. And then that one could just be like my work building or whatever, my storage building for when I'm storing up wood and things like that. So anyways, this old trailer over here is probably the next thing I'm going to be working on over here when I bring my tractor back over next time. And so I'm wanting to get over here. It's just barely standing. I thought the last big windstorm that came through would have knocked it down, but it didn't. So I'm gonna have to come over here with my tractor and or maybe just my pickup and a chain, and pull the thing the rest of the way down so that I can start pulling the wood out and putting it in a burn pile somewhere and light it off, because it's all rotted out and garbage, and really just a rodent house right now. So there's some shingles there. Unfortunately, that one didn't have a steel roof. It had a shingle roof. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it'll be well worth it. Well worth it. But yeah, the pond is back over to the left, down in that dip down there. There's lots of peaks and valleys, and just a really great place to sit and watch the sunset.